Let's go, Morty. Quick adventure, 20 minutes in and out. This panel is here mostly to talk about things that are willfully ignored by those who are in industry. And some things that we will say today might feel uncomfortable, but we still believe that we need to talk about them. And we both believe, despite being on the opposite sides of the political spectrum, we both believe that these topics are important. So we agreed very easily on the theme of the debate. So fintech doesn't exist in vacuum, nor does finance. It is pretty much dependent on the last 30 plus years of globalization that has made capital move across borders easily. However, we are now witnessing trends that aim to reverse this, mainly coming from United States. The question is, how will fintech adapt? Can fintech adapt? Because essentially, decentralized finance does depend on the freedom of movement of capital. What's your opinion, Srećko?
First of all, yeah, hi to everyone, and thanks so much for inviting both of us. I know this is called FightClub, so you probably expect us. They put us a bit on a distance because they expect us to fight, but I guess you will be a bit surprised in the things we will talk. First of all, because we will agree on many things. I fully agree that fintech and finance is not something which is in a vacuum, which can be discussed as it has been discussed here, as if the world doesn't exist, as if there is not a polycrisis. Finance is always political because the one who controls money or who has money has political power, and finance influences our world. But also the world influences finance. So there is no chair here. That was our decision that we don't have a moderator because we agreed that we will discuss today three topics. The first one is silicon, the second one is sovereignty, and the third one is survival. So I suggest we immediately start talking about silicon, which is just a metaphor for technology. And I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on technology and silicon and where we are at this moment.
Well, from my position is always known. I am a Schumpeterian by heart, which is a very position that is not very much liked by people of the Austrian School of Economics. And I think that one of the main problems that I see is that there is a myth that is perpetuated, the myth of the artificial generalized intelligence that is used to justify economic power, that is used to justify getting money from investors. And for all intents and purposes, for those of you who know something about what is the definition of intelligence, I highly agree with works of the likes like Cesar Hidalgo, who talks about this in his books and his scientific work, that intelligence is embodied and it cannot simply be recreated by algorithms. So, what does this essentially mean? That artificial generalized intelligence might as well be thermodynamically impossible in this universe. And then I ask myself, all right, who perpetuate this myth and why do they perpetuate it? And that's something very interesting. What do you think about that? You actually said to me before this debate that you would not like to talk about tech feudalism and surveillance capitalism that much. But what is your take on this? As somebody at the left, what do you see?
Yeah, so it's not that I wouldn't talk about it. I would rather prefer to talk about tech fascism because I think that's our reality
Oh,
today.
isn't it the same these
It's
days?
not really the same, but before I come there, I would like to respond because I think the question on intelligence is very important. And I'm here, of course, I have an understanding of intelligence which comes from the Marxist tradition. And I draw my understanding of intelligence from an underestimated part of Marx' Grundrisse, which is the fragment on the machines, which got its reception only in the 20th century because Grundrisse weren't published. Capital was first published, And this is a very short paragraph where Marx introduces the concept of the general intellect in English. And it's very interesting because I think what Marx is claiming is that knowledge will become the main production force. So basically what he's saying, to simplify, is that all of us who use Google, who use Google Maps, all of us who use social networks, all of us who use artificial intelligence or drive artificial intelligence, which is harvesting our common knowledge, general knowledge, are part of something which is called the general intellect. And where we are today is the general intellect is being colonized and privatized by big tech, mainly from Silicon Valley. So if you look, for instance, at Google, Google almost didn't invent anything. Google just did acquisition, Google Maps, YouTube, acquisition, acquisition, acquisition. Elon Musk also didn't really innovate. There is no Elon Musk without the state to turn around. There is this famous joke by Milton Friedman. If you would put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, they would run out of sand in 5 years. Well, I would turn it around. If you would cut the government funding to Elon Musk, to Jeff Bezos, to Mark Zuckerberg, to Bill Gates, there would be no innovation, there would be no big tech. So do you agree with that?
Well, the thing is, it's quite interesting. These people tend to become friends with the government very soon. If you look at OpenAI's documents, and now we should regulate, after they've achieved a tremendous market share, suddenly they become the incumbent, and then they say, "Oh, we need regulations," but that's just to prevent competition. Essentially, this is what destroys their position both with the government, with whatever power, economic power they aim to consolidate into political power. So the only way, I believe, is for more disruptors to be allowed into the economic arena.
Yeah, I would say not just disruption, but we should recover the concept of commons. Like whatever we do today in the digital world, we are actually now contributing to the mega machine and to the maximizing of profit of the 1%, which we could call Western oligarchs. Also, if you look at the recent inauguration of Donald Trump, who was in the first row, who was in the second row.
Yeah.
Meta, OpenAI, Sam Altman, Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and so on. I don't know whether Peter Thiel was there or not, which is interesting.
But Peter Thiel is always hidden somewhere.
Yeah, he was as always hidden, although he's the darkest figure, of course. But what you can see now in the United States is actually something what I think Peter Thiel said explicitly: competition is for losers. And I think we are going, so I'm interested if you also, what you think about that. I think we are more and more going in this science fiction, which is not science fiction anymore, scenario of this book. Movie under the same title was much worse, The Circle, by Dave Eggers, with the presumption that Google, Facebook, all the companies from Silicon Valley will come together, create a mega company, and then also take over democracy. And I see, if you look at Elon Musk and the way how Silicon Valley is now, there is this marriage between big tech and politics, which of course always existed to come to tech fascism slowly as well, or techno-feudalism. It existed in the Second World War. The role of Ford, the role of IBM in the register of Jews, this was big tech together with fascism or Nazism, creating a new reality of totalitarianism and dystopia.
Yes, exactly. And this is why, for instance, Europe has a very intimate experience with fascism. And this is why Europe decided to regulate AI, because it foresaw what it could become. So for us, the wounds run deep. And it's, I'm actually very confident in Europe's way of doing AI. You have companies like Mistral, which are open. They run on open code, right? And that's a great way how you can invite new disruptors in. And Europe is building large infrastructure, AI factories, which will be available to each and every one European who wishes to innovate, be they entrepreneurs, fintech entrepreneurs, be they scientists, be they companies, right? And I think that this is a project that's only possible in Europe. This is why CERN was built in Europe. This was why, ASML, which is pretty much the bottleneck of our civilization, which is lithography, that makes NVIDIA's chips possible. That didn't happen in the Silicon Valley. It happened in Netherlands, right? So Europe, I think, reigns supreme. If we are any empire, we are the empire of the mind. So I don't think that the battle is still yet lost, because Europe can now showcase that this can be done differently.
Here, I must say, as much as we agree on some topics, I wouldn't completely agree. So I think 2 weeks ago I was in Berlin, and I was bicycling in the Mitte. It's also very interesting that what I found in the Mitte, where is Mitte, and that's the main establishment place of Berlin. And I was really surprised to see big billboards which were saying für ein neues Zeitalter der Aufklärung, uh,
Mm.
for a new age of enlightenment. And I thought, what the fuck is happening? They have billboards about Kant, or, these grand ideas of the Enlightenment, which are also very problematic, but that's a different topic. And then you see the pictures of drones below it. And I start to research, and you see this is a company called Quantum Systems, a startup which was heavily invested into by Peter Thiel, which now has a factory somewhere near Munich, which is doubling its production for drones for the war in Ukraine. So what I find interesting, and I'm not quite sure if I fully understand it, is that on the one level, you have something what we, from my spectrum, were wishing to happen, which is the end of transatlanticism, European Union being a puppet of the United States. And that's happening on this kind of bigger nominal level. But what you have below is that Silicon Valley is still penetrating into the productions. On the one hand, they're producing drones for Ukraine. On the other hand, the president of the United States is humiliating Zelensky that he's not thankful enough and all this shit. So how do you explain this? Okay, you say that Europe is obviously the empire of mind, but inside of the empire of mind, you have these processes happening, which are kind of contradictory, or are they
But
contradictory?
then you have, Mistral signing contracts, with another military startup. If war is looming on the horizon, what do you expect people to do? I mean, essentially, Putin has decided that Europe is up for grabs. And I think that's the problem with all authoritarians. They're pretty much, you know, really don't understand what Europe is doing. Europe is Earth's research lab. Who shoots in their own research lab? Well, I would hate to say it, but only an idiot. So what the line is, if war is on the table, the question is, how will this war be fought? Obviously, the market thinks it will be fought by drones and not by tanks anymore. I, for instance, believe it can be fought without drones, just by critical denial of, let's say, research infrastructure. That is Europe's biggest power. It's soft power, right? So I'm not too sure that that we should all rile up for war and take in this war economy. That is clearly something what the EU wants to do and cannot do this at scale because we relied on NATO for a very long time.
Mhm. No, thanks for mentioning the war economy. I haven't heard here. I heard on the previous panel someone mentioned Ukraine. So thanks for mentioning Ukraine. But I haven't heard anyone, correct me if I'm wrong, to mention Gaza, for instance. And what's happening in Gaza is also interesting, both on the level of technology and Europe's role. I don't know how many people here are aware of something called lavender. Lavender is not just a plant in the Mediterranean, which is has a beautiful smell. Lavender is an AI program by the Israeli army, which makes killing lists to kill the Palestinians. So the AI constructs a list. If it's a junior Hamas operative, the AI says you can kill 20 people, civilians. If it's a senior Hamas official, I mean, this is now leaked and published. You can read it in the internet. It says you can kill 200 people, and it's mainly children and women. So what you have with technology, and that's why I think also What is important, I think, in fintech is to understand that technology is never neutral. Technology is political, and technology today is being used to kill people, among other things. And I think this is a problem of Europe today. Also mentioning Berlin, when I was in Berlin recently, I was reading the Spiegel. There was a headline in Spiegel asking, does Germany need a nuclear bomb? I mean, hello, where are we living today? If Europe's response to the wars and to the end of transatlanticism is further militarization, it's war economy, it's 800 billion euros on the European level and 1.5% of the GDP yearly rising for military investments. In Croatia, for instance, if you drive the car in the morning, you can hear people on the radio talking how many Leopards from Rheinmetall we need. I mean, even if Croatia had 100 Leopards, what's the purpose of it, for this country? We should be talking how to invest this money into social welfare, into healthcare, into education, into other things. And I don't hear anyone speaking about peace. I mean, it's the Pope speaking about peace. He's unfortunately not doing well. And it's Trump speaking about peace. But Trump is speaking about everything. So when he speaks about peace, it's like Orwell, war is peace.
Yeah, I think that, humans are indeed a terrible species. If you look at, a lot of research has been done at the famed RAND Corporation about what keeps the peace in Cold War. And it turns out, unfortunately, it is, have both sides having nuclear weapons. I'm not sure that, we could also ask ourselves, would Ukraine be ever attacked if it was allowed to keep its nuclear bombs? So nuclear bombs are absolutely terrible. They're a weapon of mass destruction. But maybe we shouldn't be trusted, and we shouldn't trust each other enough.
Okay, here I don't agree because very soon we could end up in social Darwinism. And as someone who is
But
more.
look, Srećko, this we have 40 years of Cold War that prove this.
Yeah, but what was there in the Cold War in ex-Yugoslavia, in Yugoslavia? There was something which was called the non-aligned movement. So there was obviously a huge movement which was promoting peace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That movement was very smart. Unfortunately, it was running on wrong kind of economy. But they always say, what was Yugoslavia all about? What Yugoslavia was surrounded around? Well, with problems, because somebody was very smart to draw borders the way they did, and pretty much made a country that was able to set the tone for the global South.
Exactly.
And
that's what's missing today.
Exactly. And how about this idea? Could Croatia be this voice? We have had the war. We have had, we're the only EU member that has people who have lived through a war. Do we want another war? I don't think so. This is one of the reasons why we're so damn silent. When somebody, from the commission or whoever wants to ride on tanks, some of us have very vivid experiences of death, and we cannot recommend this to anyone. So bottom line is, do you think that Croatia can play this role?
Of course not.
No?
I mean, if you look at the leadership of Croatia, of course, I don't see Croatia having this role, unfortunately, because I think to create
Do you
something.
think that leaders even think that this should be done? Or I somehow feel that stuff is happening to them as opposed to them seeing the narrative, seeing seeing this civilizational shift and then saying, okay, this is it. This is our role. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I agree with you because.
They're very reactionary.
No, I mean, Croatia, if you look at it, it doesn't have any agency in the world economy or geopolitics. I mean, what do we have? We have tourism. There is no industry anymore. Okay, this industry, fintech, is rising now, and that's why I think it's important to have critical voices here. But unlike the Yugoslav model, for instance, when you were producing stuff and you were cooperating with the global south, people from Africa came to Yugoslavia to study to become engineers and so on. You don't have that anymore. I'm not saying Croatia shouldn't have that. Of course, it should have it, but there are no critical voices in the public space or in politics who are pushing this kind of agenda. That's the problem. So, but also, I think our time is kind of running out. I would also love to turn to something which wasn't mentioned. I know For the last several years, at this kind of conferences, ECG was very sexy, right? Nowadays, I didn't hear many people talking about ECG. Now AI is sexy. So let's talk about climate a bit as well, because we're again not in a
Absolutely.
vacuum.
I mean, you know my position. I believe that climate change was inevitable the moment we started the Industrial Revolution. You had path dependency, carbon energy being baked in, and then once the incentives are aligned, you make everybody into a consumer, and that's it. You end up with this. I'm not a big believer in systemic change. I am a big believer in mitigation. I am a big believer in preparedness. But I don't believe that climate change can be stopped by some, very abstract, let's change how we think, etc. I don't think, what kind of systems do we need? I believe we need systems that tell people in Valencia not to go to fetch their car when there is a flood, lest they die. You need that kind of system. But this is going to happen more and more. Floods, fires, we need to be prepared for that. Because essentially, we might, you know, we might not guarantee, prosperity anymore, but
Yeah,
survival.
I'm not completely sure. I hate the term resilience. It's like, let's become more resilient, adapt, and then you end up with Venice with this system which was built to prevent the floods, and it will never prevent the floods of the future. I don't think so. Think here we need systemic change. I'm completely against the individualization of guilt. We are guilty. We should, as consumers, just change a bit how we act, and everything will be great. But I don't think that it's enough. The European governments are now publishing. Now it's France. It was the Nordic countries. Now the European Commission is publishing survival manuals. Like, you should be prepared if there is an earthquake, a flood, and so on. So why shouldn't we go back to the very origin of the problem? I heard that the previous panel, a banker was saying we need speed, 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 speed. I was a bit surprised because I thought he would say cocaine, because I thought that was that was more relevant in the Wall Street and banker circles. And then also, if you look at this. I really love this, and I love this logo, but it's also, I don't know how many of you are aware that there is a book in Germany published by Michael Ende, who was the author of The Never-Ending Story, who wrote a book which is called MoMo. Read MoMo. You know what's the subtitle of the book? The subtitle of the book is The Book About Time Thieves and a Little Girl Who Stopped Them. And it's exactly against speed. So you have a little village somewhere in Italy, a girl and thieves, people in gray, come and convince everyone to invest their time into time banks. And the girl comes with a kornjača. How do you say kornjača? Oh my God.
Oh, the turtle.
With a turtle. The turtle is the best friend. And her response is, let's take it slow. I know this might sound ridiculous if you're in fintech industry, but I think this is precisely what is missing. I'm not talking just about degrowth, which is also an interesting concept, but I'm talking about this fixation on growth, progress, speed, 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 which is actually the same thing which, through the futurists, led to fascism, to Mussolini, first to D'Annunzio, then to Mussolini, then to Hitler. And you have this idea that we can indefinitely extract lithium energy on a planet which is definite, which doesn't have indefinite resources. And then you end up with people who are burnout, you end up with people who are just working all the day, and then once in a year they go to a nice Adriatic island and they slow down and they see, oh my God, life is beautiful. But why wouldn't life be beautiful all the time? I know that sounds naive, but I think we have to deconstruct this fetishism of speed, the fetishism of acceleration. And you have the accelerationist today in the United States.
Absolutely, you do. The main problem with humans is that when they have it good, they stop reproducing, pretty much like mice. And all of the, you talk about degrowth, but you're living in the world of degrowth. You have population decline everywhere, pretty much everywhere, apart from Africa, right? And there are two ways out of this, right? And one of them is automation. And this is happening. And you have daily, I've been bombarded by news of, humanoid robots doing stuff in factories, etc. But if you're going to run out of people, then you have to do something about it. And people, unfortunately, want their things, right? They want their apps, they want, their consumers. There's no way back once you make them, because essentially they have savannah brains. We all have savannah brains because, unfortunately, cultural evolution is far, far faster than biological evolution. So all of the ailments that we have today, that you are unhappy, unsatisfied, because you weren't biologically built to be happy, And this is a reality you cannot escape. You can think fluffy, you can think that we should all slow down and everything, but humans are not made for this. Humans are survival specialists. For God's sakes, we all know that all of the other hominids went extinct because of us. So this is what we do. We are just built that way.
I'm not sure. Again, if you read, for instance, Peter Kropotkin, The Prince of Anarchism, I'm really glad to mention this name at the FinTech conference. He interprets Darwin in a very interesting way, in a very unexpected way, in mutual aid. The usual interpretation of Darwin is that we are all, fight for survival, fight of only the fittest survive, everyone against everyone. If you fight enough, like a fight club or whatever this is, you will survive and you will be the first one, and then you have chances in evolution. What Kropotkin shows is that already in Darwin, in his writings itself, Darwin mentions that those species who cooperate have the biggest chances for evolutionary progress. And I think what we should really recover today is, and we have the technology for it, is social cooperation. Humans are not per se evil or good. In the same way, technology is not evil or good. And I think there is a fight going on, and we have to join this fight for more mutual aid, social cooperation, understanding, community building, and not the world in which we are, where you have 1% of the people, and then you have an idiot with a chainsaw, Javier Milei, giving the chainsaw to Elon Musk, and let's now fire 10,000 people in the healthcare system. Let's take $400 million from Columbia University, 800 millions from Johns Hopkins University, and cut the whole state. And you have the typical Darwinist understanding. So I don't agree that humans themselves are trained.
But yeah, I think that you have a very, very one-dimensional understanding of Darwin. If you look at Martin Nowak, who is a prominent biologist at Harvard, he actually calls humans super cooperators. We made Neanderthals extinct, which they pretty much reigned supreme in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years before we arrived. We won because we were able to cooperate. But bottom line is, people are still slaves of their biological minds. You cannot blame them for this. And sure, yes, humans can cooperate. And there are great examples of this in the European Union. I don't see examples of this elsewhere. So maybe European Union is an idea worth fighting for. Would you agree with that?
No, I agree. It's definitely worth fighting for, but I can...
Both with cooperation and competition.
Competition is for losers, as Peter Thiel say. No, but I wouldn't dismiss, I'm sorry, the whole rest of the world. If you look at the global south and the kind of cooperation they had, if you look at, for instance, the project of Salvador Allende in the beginning of the 70s, that's exactly the opposite what AI and automation is doing now. CyberSyn, the idea that you automate government in order to help people, not that you automate government in order to help the big corporations or the banks. So I see a lot of cooperation going on in the global south. Forget Harari, forget Steven Pinker, read David Wenger and David Graeber, The Dawn of Everything. It's a book which is translated here, where they show that even before and after the agricultural revolution, you had different social models of, big states. Big cities, you had egalitarian models, you had seasonal models of governance. So throughout history, tens of thousands of years, you had experiments, not in Europe, but all over the world, in the global south and so on, of different social models. And what I'm claiming is this is not the past. This can also be the future, and it must be the future, because we are living in times of extinction. We're not living in this nice bubble where we speak how crypto will help everything. Although I think crypto is very useful. It can be very useful.
Yeah.
But I think yeah, someone was waving, their time is running out, so maybe we should unfortunately conclude, or we just take over the stage. If, yeah. Okay, I think they cut the mics. They say, oh, is that they brought back the mics. We can make an experiment. Look to Serbia, where for 4 months, more than 95% of the faculties are occupied. So maybe we can occupy it, make a plenum. You make a decision. If you clap very, very strong, you want us on stage. Nikola will kill us, but yeah, unfortunately, someone will come and kick us out. It might be Eva there sitting behind. So let's conclude somehow. I don't know how.
I think that you have a valid point. There have been many experiments in governance throughout the world, but people vote with their feet. So people risk their lives every goddamn day to cross the Mediterranean or to cross the Atlantic. Well, not anymore with Trump, but to cross the Mediterranean, to make a long journey from the Sahel across and pay their hard-earned money that they got to people who traffic them across. So just follow the people where they want to live. I believe that dark times are upon us. And I think that democracy is not guaranteed and that we should guard places where it exists. And we should guard it, I believe, with our lives.
I agree with that.